I've got a Bible reading that I want to read today. Normally we include that in our sermon space, but I want to read that now. One, because we're going to do something in a minute that is a perfect reflection of what I'm about to read, and then this will also inform what I'm going to speak about this morning. So it comes from Matthew 25. And I don't know what verses because I'm reading from the Message and there's no verses in the Bible that I'm reading. So anyway, it's Matthew 25. And it says this: God's kingdom is like a man going off on an extended trip. He called his servants together and delegated responsibilities. To one he gave $5,000, to another $2,000, and to a third $1,000, depending on their abilities. And then he left. Right off, the first servant went to work and doubled his master's investment, and the second did the same. But the man with the single $1,000 dug a hole and carefully buried his master's money. After a long absence, the master of those three servants came back and settled up with them. The one given $5,000 showed him how he had doubled his investment, and his master commended him. "Good work, you did your job well. From now on, be my partner." And the servant with $2,000 showed how he had also doubled his master's investment. And the master commended him. "Good work, you did a good job. From now on, be my partner." And the servant given $1,000 said, "Master, I know you have high standards and you hate careless ways, that you demand the best and make no allowances for error. I was afraid I might disappoint you, so I found a good hiding place and secured your money. And here it is, safe and sound, down to the last cent." And the master was furious. "That's a terrible way to live. It's criminal to live cautiously like that. If you knew I was after the best, why did you do less than the least? The least you could have done would be to have invested the sum with the bankers, where at least it would have gotten you a little bit of interest. Take the $1,000 and give it to the one who risked the most, and get rid of this play it safe who won't go out on a limb. Throw him out in utter darkness." So what we want to do today is honour somebody who has multiplied the talents that they have. And it's not often you get to celebrate a retirement in a church context. And we sort of have a retirement of sorts, because we all know that you don't actually retire when you're in God's kingdom. But we want to honour the hardworking volunteer hours that Eileen Sen has given to this church. So Eileen, I'm going to ask you to come down the front. And maybe, because we've got a bit to say about you, maybe just sit on the front row for a bit, so you don't have to stand for too long in front of us. And this is Jo, her daughter. So Eileen's not going to step back from serving, but she will be stepping away from and handing over her leadership and oversight of our kitchen and being our kitchen and hospitality coordinator. She's made it clear she still wants things to do. So we're not going to put you out to pasture, Eileen. And I bet after the service you'll still be serving tea in the kitchen. You will still see her in the kitchen. Eileen is a trellis builder and a vine grower. And I'm going to talk about that in my message, so it'll make sense at the end. So listen out for that. And I don't know if you know, but Eileen is vision impaired, quite severely vision impaired, and completely colourblind. But I have never, ever heard her complain about that. She's never been able to drive, and she said to me about a week ago, she said, "I've never been able to do what others do, take people to appointments and run errands and do things for people, but I can cook." And actually, she can do way more than cook. She's been a leader, she knows how to organise, she knows how to create systems, she can give directions, she thinks of all the details, she makes people feel welcome and loved through food and hospitality. Eileen came to this church in 1990. Can you tell that your daughter's been asking you questions this week? She's been feeding me all the information. I knew some of it, not all of it. She's been serving in this church and in this kitchen for 34 years. And in this time, not only has she worked in the kitchen and been the hospitality coordinator, she's been involved in Midweek Escape and Music and Movement for about 20 years. MOPS as well at some stage. She's been a pastoral elder for 10 years. She's been running our food pantry for 10 years, making board suppers for that time. She's catered for weddings, funerals, parties, celebrations, events, and made countless shortbread biscuits. And she stands at the door each week and she looks out for new people and for people who might be missing. And perhaps the most significant contribution, Eileen, is that you make jams and chutneys that she has donated to the church for profit. And we've dug into the archives. I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to come up with an accurate figure, but we're pretty sure that it's well over $10,000 that you've contributed in just jams and chutneys. So if you want to meet a living treasure, then you need to come and meet Eileen. And God gave Eileen a talent and she's multiplied that over and over. And I told her what I learnt from her is that it's not the one big things that we do in the kingdom, it's lots of the little things over an extended period of time make the difference. And Eileen, we've got two special messages from you, one from Michael O'Neill and one from Karen, both who were pastors when you were obviously in the time that you've been serving in the kitchen and also when you were on staff. So we've got that to show you.
Well, congratulations, Eileen. You've served in that ministry in the kitchen for so long. You have led a team. You have contributed so much to the church there at Les Murdy. I certainly remember when you were part of our staff team when I was up there in the church, and the contribution you made week after week after week, you and your team. Some of the things that stand out to me the most, there was never a funeral, there was never a wedding, there was never some special event when you did not pull out all stops to ensure that those people who came to the church were welcomed, were cared for, were fed. You have a wonderful legacy there at Les Murdy Baptist Church, and such fun, such good humour, such care. Surely this is a great contribution that you have made. God bless you.
Good morning, LBC, and good morning, Eileen. I'm really thrilled that you, Eileen, are being formally celebrated today as you mark your retirement from your hospitality role at LBC. I well remember when you formally came on staff many, many years ago. You had, of course, been serving prior to that, and there was no money when you came on in the staff role. But we brought you into that space and established the role because we recognised the importance of generous hospitality as part of the way that we serve each other and our wider community. And we recognised in you somebody who had the skills and the capacity to be canny and smart and creative in that space, but also someone who had great passion for using hospitality, using hosting as a way of letting people know something about the generous love of our Father God. I've got some wonderful memories of those times together. Particular favourites include scones and jam and cream for the Gypsy Jokers at one funeral that we did. In fact, funerals are part of my special memories, the hospitality that were provided in those places. Time and again, people were moved, sometimes to tears, often to tears, as they saw the generous catering that was provided and the beautiful way that food was laid out and the tablecloths and the flowers on the tables. People appreciated that little room out the back that you would set up so that there was a place for people to sit between cemetery and memorial service. I remember you sending some of us round to the IGA when you thought that the fruit quantity or variety wasn't enough for the children at M&M. Lots of happy memories in that place. And if I can be allowed a personal comment here in that space as well, what has been a really special thing for me is that over those years of serving together, we also became friends. And I'm one of the fortunate people who still has zucchini relish in her fridge and jam, and at special occasions, shortbreads. Thank you, Eileen, for all that you have done in this service role.
Thanks, stand up here. Eileen, we can't possibly thank you for all the years of service and your leadership in the hospitality space, and for what you've done by using your gifts to build God's kingdom here at LBC. You've done it with joy and sacrifice and humility, and never ever wanting anything back in return. And I have no doubt that when all you're doing is done, God is going to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So here's a gift for you. Thank you. You're welcome. You right? Okay, so let me just give you a bit of context about what we're going to talk about today, because I'm going to start talking and you're going to go, I wonder why Ruth's talking about that, because her role is a care pastor and she's talking about buildings. And yes, you're right, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So, when you start a new job, you get given a role description, which is great because it guides you in what you've been asked to do. And after you've been working in a team for a while, and for Josh and Jared and myself, that's been about 18 months, you start to work out what your gifts and strengths are, and sometimes, where possible, it's worth making some changes. And so a few weeks ago, Josh and I did a few swaps, and I have found over and over in the past 18 months, but actually probably in the past 20 years, that I always get naturally drawn to anything to do with facilities, environments, hospitality, the kitchen. And Josh will tell you he knows knows way more about tea towels than he wishes to know about, because hospitality was kind of under him. So we've swapped a few things around, and he's taken over the leadership of groups, which is more suited to his leadership skills, and I'll continue primarily in the care space, but I also get to do what I love to do naturally, and that's leading the teams that look after our facilities, our environments, and our hospitality. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I love physical spaces. I love creating them, I love dreaming about them, I love improving them, but mostly I love using physical spaces and creating environments where people feel welcome and people are loved, whether that's in my own home or whether that's here or in other contexts. And some of you don't notice your environment at all, or maybe you're not conscious of how your environment affects you. For you, it's more about the people, not so much the surroundings that you find yourself in. But if you're like me, some of you will definitely notice that your environment affects how you feel emotionally. Environments communicate something to us. And interestingly for me, that comes from a very deep cultural root. You see, I'm Dutch. I was born in Holland, in the Netherlands, and my family migrated to Australia when I was nearly 5. And I have a favourite word, and out of all the words in the English and Dutch language that I know, this is my very favourite word. And it's a Dutch word, and it's shaped my life more than any other word ever has. And the word is gezellig. So you need to have a really good Dutch or German accent to get that, that throat word. So the word is gezellig. And they have the same word in Danish. It's hygge. You might have heard that one. That one's a little bit familiar. It's been thrown around on places like the block. And interestingly, we don't have an equivalent word in English that actually captures what this word means. The easiest translation is cosy, but cosy falls way short of what gezellig means. Gezellig is a word that's used to describe a physical space, but it's also used to describe a relational space. And it's often used to describe both at the same time. In essence, gezellig means creating a warm atmosphere and enjoying the good things of life with good people. So if you're looking for a cafe or a restaurant to have a nice meal, you're looking for something that's gezellig. It's warm and it's inviting and it has nice decor and it's got a good vibe and people are enjoying themselves. Or if you're invited to someone's home for dinner, you might describe the fact that you've had a gezellig time. It's been warm and friendly and they've gone to an effort with food and surroundings and they've created an atmosphere for a lovely evening together and you've had a good relationship. Or if you've been to a party and you've had a great time and the food was yum and you had some great conversations and you met some new people and you felt known and seen, you would describe your time as gezellig. And Simon has learned that with me it's all about gezellig. If we go somewhere, he will say now, is this gezellig enough for you? Because physical and relational spaces matters to me. And I think they matter to God. This week it reminded me of a leadership journal that I had years ago that sparked this for me, back when content was brought to you in magazines rather than podcasts and digital online content. But here it is, here's the cover. Your walls speak. Bricks and mortar say a lot about the gospel you preach. This so resonated with me, and that particular edition was all about how churches use their buildings as ministry opportunities. Our walls speak. Our buildings and surroundings communicate something to the people who see us from the street and come through the doors. And it's got me thinking, what should the purpose of our building be, and how could we and should we be using it better? Like our Bible reading today, our buildings are a talent that we've been given to use creatively and responsibly to build God's kingdom. And if we look through the Bible, we can see there are places and physical spaces that were vehicles used for spiritual and interpersonal relationships. Right from the very beginning, God was invested in relationships, but he used physical spaces to invest in relationships with people. And it starts right back in Genesis. After God made the earth and the plants and the animal and mankind, it says in Genesis 2:8, then the Lord planted a garden, and there he placed the man he had made. And then in chapter 3, verse 8, a little bit further forward, it says, the man and the woman heard God walking in the garden. So God did not remain distant, a deity that is up there looking down on us. He didn't create us and put us on earth and then wait for us to die to go to heaven to be with him. He walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, and he created a space, a home for him to dwell with the man he'd created. He created a physical space, and he used that to build relationship with us. So if we then fast forward to the time of Moses, when Moses was leading the Israelites, they'd escaped out of slavery in Egypt, and they were on their way to a place called the Promised Land. And then God says to Moses in Exodus 25:8, have the people of Israel build me a holy sanctuary so I can live among them. And then the next 13 chapters after that are all the instructions for building the tabernacle, the place where God's presence would dwell amongst the people. And actually in the first 5 books of the Bible, there are 50 chapters devoted just to the tabernacle alone, the physical space God prepared for dwelling with mankind. I think physical space must have mattered to God. If we then fast forward a bit further forward in the Bible to King David, who's the king that's ruling over Israel. And at one point, David makes this observation, and he says in 2 Samuel 7, verse 2, King David summoned Nathan the prophet and said, look, I'm living in a beautiful cedar palace, and the ark of God, which was in the tabernacle, where God's presence dwelt, is in a tent. David thinks it's not good that God dwells in a tent, and he consults with Nathan the prophet, and they seek God's direction, and what followed was the building of the temple, a more permanent structure for God to dwell. And the point is that David and God cared about a building where God could dwell on earth with his people. So then if we jump into the New Testament, God comes to dwell with us in the most amazing way. He comes to dwell with us in person. We have Jesus, who actually who's God in physical presence among us in human form. God no longer contained in buildings, but physically present with us and present in human hearts through the Holy Spirit. But that did not mean that Jesus and the disciples did not use physical spaces to do relational work to build God's kingdom. Many spaces were used as spiritual and relational spaces. The Jewish temple, the synagogues, they used villages, they walked along the roads, they used homes, they used parties, mountainsides, a garden, a boat on a lake. It seems that we never have any kind of relationship with others without some kind of physical space. And the type of physical space can impact the type of relationships that can happen. Now, I get that the church is not the building. The church is the people. And the church, the people, the church, we meet in a building, which we also call the church. So it gets a bit confusing and a bit blurry. And maybe you think we should care more about building spiritual beings rather than energy on physical spaces. But the reality is that we have a building, and we have a physical building that is prominent in our community. And here's something that I currently really struggle with. Currently, our buildings are only used about 5% of the time on a regular basis. Maybe a bit more if you count the office space and the staff that use office space during the week. And I came across this quote just recently. Churches are the worst stewards of square footage of anyone except maybe the AFL. And I get why. Because at one time we built buildings to house programs and events that were mostly run by the church. And at one time, I remember we had something running just about every single day of the week in these buildings. But the reality is that culture shifts and church culture shifts, and no longer can some churches run all the programs they think a community needs. They don't often have the resources or the volunteer base to do that. And we might run some, but not everything that could possibly utilise all of our buildings all of the time. But what if we could think differently about our resources that God has given us? What if we viewed our space as ministry instead of a place where we do ministry? Let me read that again. What if we viewed our space as ministry instead of a space where we do ministry? What if we could use these buildings, or let these buildings be used for our community beyond what we need them or what we use them for? We often plan and construct our buildings around our needs on a Sunday, but that is currently at the most about half a day a week. What if we were able to leverage the space we have for our community needs throughout the week? And what if we could partner with community instead of having our building a vacant site? And here's the thing, we've started doing this already. And here's the impact of that. So let me tell you a story of what's kind of unfolded this year. So 12 months ago, a few of us went to a forum held by the City of Kalamunda. And it was a new initiative, and we've talked about a little bit, I've mentioned it a couple of times, it was Compassionate Communities, raising a place where they're raising awareness about death and dying and end of life in our community. And there was a small group, this is a small group with just a little bit of funding coming from a small grant. And out of that came a task force, which was a committee of people looking at other events that could be held in the community. And John Jenks and Dawn Jenks and myself, we went to the first of those meetings. And when we went to that first meeting, that little committee was hiring a venue that was costing them money, which was coming out of the small bit of grant money they had. And so we said to them, would you like to have your meetings in our space rather than having to pay for something? You could have it for free. We've got a building that's sitting here empty, on some days, so you may as well come and use it. And they were thrilled and blown away that we would extend that offer to them. And they've been having those meetings every 2 or 3 months on a Saturday afternoon here, and we've just been providing afternoon tea for them. And then this group wanted to run a free community event to run Dying to Know Day. And we said, do you want to have it here? We've got an empty building that's not used at night, and you could have it for free, and we'll put supper on for you. And so we set this up for them. We cleared out the chairs. We took all the foyer furniture, sat it up cafe style for them, used our sound gear and screen, and we set it all up. And there was about 30 people from the community, some who'd never stepped foot inside a church building before, that attended that event. And from the moment people walked through the door, I overheard these comments. Wow, this is a nice place. Is this a church? This is not what I expected. And the Shire staff commented about how organised we were and how good our tech was and our sound and microphones and projector, and we'd got the PowerPoint slides for the speaker and we had it all ready to go, and I was able to go, they were just like, wow, you guys are amazing, you can do all this. I was going, well, yeah, we do it every week. So we're just doing what we normally do. But it wasn't only about the physical space that helped to break down barriers. It was also about the relational space that people got when they got here. People didn't leave afterwards, and they mingled and they chatted. And then I got talking to one man from our community. And of course, there came the inevitable question, do you work here? So I could tell him, yeah, I do work here. I'm actually one of the pastors. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, oh, and you're such a nice person. Maybe he was shocked he could have a normal conversation in a church with somebody who was a pastor. But you know what happened? That same week, I was in Woolies and I heard someone call out my name, and I turned around and it was the man I'd spoken to on the Thursday night. And we stopped and had a conversation in front of the deli counter in Woolies, and he commented about how great the event was and how helpful it was for him to start thinking about getting his affairs in order. A physical space that created a relational connection with someone who would otherwise probably never step foot in a church or have an opportunity to talk about end-of-life issues. And then it doesn't end there, because last week I got an email from the lady who runs the Compassionate Communities Task Force, and she's the Community Development Officer for the City of Kalamunda, and she's in the process of applying for an age-friendly grant to conduct art sessions for older people. 6 weekly art sessions in our area, and she asked would we be interested in being involved in providing a room to host their art classes, and could she put that in the grant, to which I emailed back, absolutely. Not only that, we have a midweek escape group that meets on a Wednesday, and there'd be this awesome synergy if, a community group was doing art and our midweek escape group was doing, and there was like interaction with that. So watch that space. We've got a huge ministry opportunity right on our doorstep. So let me explain what this might look like using this imagery. So thinking about our physical and relational space is like thinking about having a trellis and a vine. So the trellis represents our physical space and the systems that go along with keeping our physical space running and what happens in this space. It's the systems and structure that holds up the vine. And the vine is the relational building of God's kingdom. It's the church's ministry, and it's what we're called to do to help people by offering care and services, but also helping them to discover and follow Jesus. And in our context, we have both. We have a trellis and we have a vine, and they both need tending and looking after. We could have a great looking trellis, like the one up there, nice lattice trellis. We could have a beautiful building with new and modern facilities, lovely maintained grounds, a fantastic functional kitchen, well-equipped kids areas, multi-purpose rooms, and a nice outdoor gathering space. And we need that, and I would absolutely love to see all of that. But we could have a great looking trellis, but nothing's growing on it. Likewise, we could have a fantastic looking vine This building could be a host of hive of activity, a gathering space for people in the community, lots of people coming through the door, people wanting to hang out here, have conversations about faith and discovering Jesus and being loved and cared for. But if our buildings are substandard and our systems are not in order and it's chaos and we can't keep the place clean and inviting and the maintenance is lacking and we don't have enough toilets and enough parking and we don't have enough volunteers to make connections with people, then the vine will collapse and fall over without a good trellis supporting it. So we need and we want both. We need a good trellis that supports a flourishing vine, and we need a flourishing vine that is supported by a sturdy trellis. And we need to be good stewards of the spaces we have, because an inviting space invites people. A modern, up-to-date, inviting space invites people, which means if we're going to use these buildings as relational spaces, we need to be committed to looking after them and developing them or redeveloping them as best we can. But if we're going to have a nice space, we also need people using the space, and we need people in the space to engage relationally with those who come here. We need trellis builders and we need vine growers. And some of you might naturally be one or the other, or some of you might be both. Some of you are really practical. You're trellis builders. And I get you, because I love nothing more than having a paintbrush and a drill and flat pack furniture to put together. I like building trellises. We need you. We have great volunteers in these spaces and teams, but we need more people. We need space planners and painters and gardeners and handymen and women and DIYers and decorators. We need a master plan for our buildings and our grounds, which are getting older, and we need to think about future-proofing what we have. And that takes funds. We have a hall that could do with soundproofing and heating and cooling to make it more usable. We'd love to finish off our kitchen and bring it up to date functionally. We want to invest in our kids' areas. We've got an idea that we're dreaming about, a patio out the front to create more undercover and outdoor space. There's so much we could do to improve our facilities. And we need people excited and willing to put their hands up for trellis building. But some of you are less practical, and some of you are more relational. And we need you to build relationships, not just out in the community, but with people who currently use this space and will use this space in the future. We don't just want this space to be physically inviting, we want it to be relationally inviting. And for that, we need people to step up and step into being the church to our community. And the only reason that man said hello to me in Woolies was because he was welcomed into our physical space, but he was also welcomed into our space relationally. And he came to something in our buildings, and there was someone there to meet him and welcome him when he came. So some of you are trellis builders and some of you are vine growers. And here's another way to be a vine grower. So we have a music and movement program that happens for mums and kids fortnightly on a Wednesday morning. We sometimes have 40 kids and parents come to that group from our community, and we have volunteers that put that on. So we have presenters and helpers in the kitchen and set up. We do really well with our physical invite, but we are desperate for people who are willing to invest relationally into the lives of people who come to that program, with conversations with parents and grandparents. We need vine growers in that space. So are you a trellis builder or a vine grower? I've got a final challenge for you, and it's just my thought. I'm just going to put it out there. Hopefully I won't get in trouble for it. I know that for decades our church has had land vested across the road to us. And I know that there have been many attempts at getting something happening across the road. And I know we started that journey with the Nature Play Playground, which gets used regularly. And I also know that current plans have stalled due to funding and the current cost of building and the whole building crisis. But what if, in this season, God's saying, how about you just be faithful with what you currently have? What if this site right here, these buildings, could be a hub for our community? What if we could fill these walls every day of the week, not with our stuff? It will include our stuff, like church on a Sunday, and youth group, and music and movement, and weddings, and funerals, and functions. It'll include our stuff. But also whatever comes our way that the community needs. It could be exercise classes, kids programs, recreational endeavours, social clubs, bingo nights, AA meetings, I don't know. The list could be endless. But any group that needs a space to meet and an inviting space that welcomes people. And what if we were just faithful and committed to maxing out what we have and then seeing where that leads? And it'll take some trellis builders and some vine growers. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be sitting on a talent that's buried, that we pay money to keep running each week, but its doors are closed 95% of the time and it doesn't have any life flowing through it during the week. And if you want to be part of changing that, then let us know. And we can include you in the thinking and the planning and the dreaming and get you connected in that. My dream is that this corner block where the church sits on the corner of Brady and Varley Road becomes a place that is opening and welcoming and gezellig, a place that creates a warm atmosphere and enjoys the good things of life with good people, and in the process helps people find Jesus. And when God looks at the talents he's given us as a church to steward, I want him to say, like the master did to the servant, good job, you did your job really well. So does anyone want to join me? Let's just pray. God, you've given us so much. And we stand on the shoulders of people that have gone before us. The people 50 years ago who stood on a vacant block of land and dreamed that a church would be built here, and then that was our hall. And then the people in the 80s who recognised we needed more space than what we had and built this place that we sit in. And we don't want to sit on this talent, this space that can be used for our community and not do anything with it. And we pray, God, that you give us ideas and bring people across our paths. We thank you for the partnership with the Shire that started in such a small way, that recognise we've got facilities and we've got people that are willing to serve our community. And we thank you for that relationship that started with the Shire. And we just ask that for whatever effort we can put in, that you will come along and multiply that this place will be a vibrant place where people come into relationship with people who follow you, and then they too can discover and find Jesus. And we commit that to you in Jesus' name, amen.